This is Your Own Best Company, a podcast for people who love to work alone. Hey there, everybody. Franklin Taggart here with Your Own Best Company, a podcast for people who love working alone. And the guest that I am with today is someone that you've already heard from a couple of times. Joanie Connell, my good friend, is here to talk about some really cool program things that she's been up to for the last several months. And you may remember her from, we did a walkthrough of the Strengths Finder. And then we also talked at one point just about assessments in general and all of the different things that you can find out using assessments. Joanie is an organizational psychologist, and she works with her company, Flexible Work Solutions, in a variety of roles, both coaching and consulting and otherwise. So, Joanie, it's great to have you back.
Oh, thanks, Franklin. It's a pleasure to be here.
Today, the thing that we're going to be talking about is a program that I went through with you, it's probably been about at least 6 months ago, I'm thinking. And it's called Positive Intelligence. And I was fascinated with this program for a variety of reasons. But it was a six-week program. And in this time, we learned about some internal saboteurs that are at work that keep people from really achieving the highest levels of what they want to do in their life. And I'm real curious, where did you run across this training?
Oh, that's a good question. It was actually a good friend and colleague of mine who invited me to join her in a training program to become fluent in positive intelligence and to be a coach. And I went and read about it and found out that it was really based on some solid science.
Yeah.
There's so many different things out there that are just the flavor of today, right? And
Yeah.
I looked at this, and it actually had a lot of research behind it, and it was based on psychology and a few different domains, cognitive, neuroscience, and some clinical psychology too. And so I joined her, and I've been a believer in it ever since. It's really simple to grasp at the beginning and to implement, and people like it because it's something that you can do quickly and access during the day, and not, I guess part of it, we'll get into what it's all about, but it's something that you can just sort of fit into your day. Maybe I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I liked about it, is that we could, there were different stages during the day when you would have a check-in, like on the app that we'll talk about more in detail here in a minute. But that was one of the things that I really enjoyed about it as well, that it wasn't just this once a week kind of a thing, or even once a day. It was something that was worked into the routine of the day, and the app kind of supported that. When you first went through the program, what were you most surprised by about yourself that you discovered?
Well, let's see. I actually had a couple of interesting revelations there, and in the 6 weeks, you'd end up digging deep toward the end.
Yeah.
On some things, and realizing how some of my childhood experiences and growing up and believing certain things, how much that affects me today.
Yeah.
And what I do, and how my inner critics are acting, and being able to let them go was huge for me.
Yeah. What difference did you notice as you practiced that?
Well, it was forgiveness to myself.
Yeah.
That really helped. And I've been in psychology for a long time, and I go through various programs and have, worked through a lot of things in my lifetime. But I think this one was really related to work. That's how I had taken the approach, is looking at why I'm achieving things and what's driving me and how I criticize myself and have barriers to my success. And uh, taking that and saying, I don't have to be that way.
Yeah.
There is another way, and sometimes you think after a certain point in life that you kind of just gotten to where you are, and that's who you are. And
Yeah.
I mean, I shouldn't say that because I work on development with people all the time. I hear that from others too, and they're like, "No, there's always room for change." But I mean, your personality, deep seated, is who you are. But realizing that some of these aren't necessarily personality. There's a lot at work in your own head. And I think the other thing that's nice is for a lot of people, and myself included, is knowing that it's not just me. So often
Yeah.
you say, "Oh, I'm criticizing myself because I'm not really as good as I need to be," but finding out that everyone has that to an extent, and maybe in different ways, and you're not any worse or better than anyone else.
Right. So there's just kind of an acceptance that happens then
Hmm.
as you work through this. That was a lot of my experience as well. Is that particularly the inner critic was one that I had to work with a lot. That voice, that critical voice within me that just tells me how stupid I am.
Hmm.
Which leads me into the idea of saboteurs, and that's one of the things that I think that this program. I think this program really goes into that a little bit more in detail than any other that I've ever taken.
Hmm.
This idea that we all have internal saboteurs that arise from time to time. Talk to me a little bit about how, first of all, how do people become aware of the saboteurs and what's going on with them?
Okay, well, in terms of the positive intelligence
Hmm.
program that I work with, there's a great online assessment that you can do very quickly within 5 minutes just to find out which are your top saboteurs.
Yeah,
And I usually bring people to that, and it's positiveintelligence.com. It's pretty easy. You can find it. It's free,
yeah,
and it's something that can bring awareness to you. And there are 9 saboteurs, specific ones, and we all have some to some extent. And but the ones that are at the top of the list, our number 1 through 3, say, are the ones that are probably criticizing us the most, and those are the ones to focus on.
so what are some of the identities there?
Hmm. Well, let's see. I can tell you some. There, some of mine, for example, which, well, I guess I'm not alone. So people out
No.
there who feel this way too. Pleaser is one of mine.
Yeah,
Pleaser is some, and obviously it's good to please people, and that can be a positive. But when it becomes pleasing people for the wrong reasons, or because it causes me stress, and then I go into that mode of pleasing people, it doesn't necessarily lead to the right or the best outcomes for everybody involved.
yeah,
And I'll give you an example of that, which is something that I've had to work on throughout my career, is trying to say yes, when people ask me to do things, and
yeah,
not wanting to disappoint them, and then taking on too much, right? And working all night, burning the midnight oil kind of thing to get things done, and then of course beating myself up because I'm taking on too much, and it spirals down there. But I think that the saboteur aspect of the pleaser is saying, I'm not good enough. I'm a bad, person, or I won't succeed if I don't please the person and say yes to them. as opposed to a more positive way of saying, making a decision. Is this something I should say yes to?
Yeah.
Is there an alternative solution? Maybe being a little more creative, or understanding that the person needs something, and perhaps they don't, I'm not the one to provide it for them, so things like that. That would be a healthier way of dealing with it, rather than me feeling stressed out and feeling unworthy if I don't say yes.
Yeah. So it just gives you the overall process gives you a little bit more response time
Mm-hmm.
between some kind of a feeling and some kind of a reaction, right?
Right. Yeah.
So how have you seen that play out? As far as the pleasing saboteur, how have you seen that play out for yourself in terms of being able to make new decisions?
Well, the whole point of the program is to, like you said, slow it down and recognize when you're in that mode of feeling the stress,
Yeah.
or feeling uh, what we might call like the survivor brain taking over, the fight or flight, the tensing up. And that's an emotional intelligence based kind of thing that people talk about, but it's also neurological. I mean, we have different symptoms that we pay attention to, like, are my hands tensing up? Am I getting laser focused and not seeing the big picture? And is my heart rate going up? Am I starting to feel, that I'm very tense? And acknowledging that and saying, okay, this is because I have a saboteur. And the way that I really love it, that the positive intelligence program visualizes it, is the little saboteurs like outside of your body,
Yeah.
like on your shoulder, saying, oh, you need to, please, you're not going to get the project if you don't do this. You're not going to succeed if you don't do this for them. And I have to externalize it and slow it down and say, okay, this is a saboteur speaking,
Yeah.
this little external critic that's going to be there criticizing me no matter what I do, because I have other saboteurs as well, right?
Yeah.
If it's not pleasing, it might be something else, like hyperachiever or something like that. So if I can just say, okay, and then I have like a little visual of sort of letting it float away, or something like that, saying, okay, I don't have to pay attention to that. And in that moment, slow it down. And there are some other, I guess you would say, meditative kind of approaches to doing that too.
Yeah.
And there are different kinds of things you can focus on to refocus on a positive, which are very quick.
Yeah.
Very quick little things, like even just taking a couple of deep breaths, right? Everyone knows that one, right? You've heard it.
Yeah.
Take a couple of deep breaths, slow it down, and then finding a way to respond in a way that works for you. But there are several different little techniques like that are in the program that can help you, rather than saying, okay, take an hour each day and meditate,
Yeah.
which is also probably helpful, right, for people. But in the moment, how do you do something within, 10, 20 seconds, so that you're not saying, wait a minute, excuse me, I got to go take an hour. I'll be right back,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, in the workplace, I mean, in work relationships, these saboteurs are at play all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And like in the situations where you would be working with a team, how would you approach helping people understand not only their own saboteurs, but maybe the other saboteurs in the room?
Right. Well, I have found it to be extremely liberating for teams to go through this. And there has to be a certain amount of trust to begin with, to open up and be a little vulnerable.
Yeah.
And you can talk about it at a superficial level, and picking your saboteurs, because that's not like your strength necessarily. It's something that's your self-critic. So making sure a team is at that point where they're okay to do that,
Yeah.
and having them take the assessment and then look at their top ones and sharing. Sometimes I pair people up, or put people together who have the similar saboteurs, so they can relate their experiences, in smaller breakouts.
Yeah.
And that's a way to help each other understand, like, oh yeah, I get the same thing, and everyone feels more empowered, like, okay, I'm not the only one. This, and there's empathy there. People can understand. And then comparing and contrasting to how others have different saboteurs that are, criticizing their own behaviors and thoughts, that they can develop the empathy to move forward. And what we try to do is then teach people to do more of a positive way of handling this for themselves, right?
Yeah.
But also understanding that others have their critics too can be extremely useful, especially, in terms of having the empathy and leading people and helping them to get in a positive place.
That's a great way to think about it, and I would also see the implications within families and other kinds of relationships as well.
Mm-hmm.
That it's like as you start to understand your own saboteurs and you can kind of understand those of others,
Mm-hmm.
that empathy can develop much more strongly. One of the things that I was actually surprised by and impressed with was that there was an app that was used in support of this. Now, it's not just the app. There's an entire system involved. There's a systematic way of working through all of these different things within 6 weeks' time, which in my mind is actually kind of miraculous. Talk to me a little bit about like the way that this rolls out for people, because there's reading that's done. There's the daily app. There's they call them PQ reps.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about how the system itself works.
Okay. Sure. Well, if you think about it, it's very similar to a fitness boot camp, for physical fitness. You want to achieve a goal at the end of 6 weeks, usually to be stronger, more fit or something, and you might have some specifics there or some challenge that you're working toward. And the idea behind a boot camp there is that it's a bit intense at the beginning and you're working regularly.
Yeah.
And it's similar with the mental fitness. That's what we call it. The positive intelligence really has a sort of mental fitness component to it, where you are exercising your brain.
Yeah.
And there is science behind this, that the neurotransmitters, they can sort of reroute themselves to make new behaviors and habits form, right?
Yeah.
And so if you do this regularly, just like changing any habit, multiple times is really important, over hundreds and hundreds of times that you'll get to have a new behavior. And the way the app works is, first of all, the whole program is to become informed, right, to have an educational piece. And often when you go to training programs, that's where you leave it, right? You've done the education and now you're like, okay, go out and do the practice. But this includes the full 6 weeks so that you're actually practicing it and you're learning as you go, so that each week you actually have exercises to do. And the app is on the phone, which is really nice because it has little reminders and it's something that you do throughout the day.
Yeah.
And you might just take a minute or 3 minutes, right? Just a few minutes, several times a day. And over a course of a week, it adds up to a few hours, but each day it's not like you're having to carve time out to do something. You can do it while you're walking, you can do it while you're sitting, you can do it while you're waiting for something. There are just different times if you spread it out. So the idea is to learn the techniques and to practice them as you go, and that will retrain your brain and your habits to actually be able to help you more quickly recognize when you're in that moment, feeling the saboteur, stop the saboteur from criticizing you, letting it go, and then using your SAGE, which is like the positive intelligence piece, to help you come out with a more, healthier response.
You started with the pleaser as one of the saboteurs, but what are some of the others? There are 9 altogether.
Yeah, well, things that people probably all recognize in themselves. Avoider is one, right? When you're avoiding conflict, often, people who do that. Controller is another one. We're talking about entrepreneurs, right? A lot of entrepreneurs are controllers too, because they want to feel comfortable being in control. And, obviously being in control is better than being out of control. your people tend to be happier that way. But if you're anxious about it and that's what's driving you to be in control, then it's going to come out in a negative way, and you're going to make others feel uncomfortable. Hyperachiever is another one.
Yeah.
That's another one that, especially around the entrepreneurs, is wanting to achieve for unhealthy reasons rather than healthy reasons. Feeling unworthy if you don't achieve. And sometimes that can be a particular problem for leaders, because you take the results of the work personally.
Yeah.
Right. And you're just like, I'm not good because the project didn't work out, even if it was another competitor showed up and took the market from you. It was external, outside of your control, or a hurricane showed up. You're still beating yourself up
Yeah.
rather than thinking that there was another reason.
The thing that really strikes me about the saboteurs is that if you look at like psychological development, most of them are protective mechanisms that we developed early in our lives. I know for myself that avoidance was a strong one, and pleasing was another one. And, one of the things that has been a recurring pattern in my life is seeking approval from other people. And there are times when I'm sure that served me well at a younger age and kept me in the social loops that I needed to survive. But at some point, it became problematic. How do you see that kind of development at play in positive intelligence?
Well, okay, let's differentiate between somebody who is having some early childhood experiences that are traumatic, that are beyond the level of a program that could help. And that would be therapy, would be the recommendation, right? We want to make sure that a lot of this is developed out of some of this research and practice in therapy and neuroscience and others. But if somebody really needs to work through something that's deeper psychological, that's affecting their lives, then therapy would be the answer. But most people have, we all have something that was developed in childhood that was helpful at the time that may not be as helpful now.
Yeah.
Now, you don't have to have had a horrible traumatic childhood.
No.
You can have a perfectly normal childhood and great parents and everything. But let's say, you've got siblings that show up or something. You used to be, like, say, the oldest sibling, and then all of a sudden the next one comes along and you're feeling like, oh, they're paying attention to the younger sibling all the time, and I'm not getting the attention, right? And you're just like this little tiny kid, right? Maybe 3, 5 years old, right? And so you start doing things to try to say, please the parents, and then get the approval and get their attention, or achieve. Hyperachievement can come out of that too. It could be all sorts of things. Victim is another one that comes up for people, like, oh, they're always paying attention to the younger kid and not me. Poor me, and there are reasons why that comes up too. And they might pout, and then all of a sudden the parents will pay attention. I'm like, oh, you're unhappy, let's give you attention. But as you get to be an adult, those behaviors aren't as useful. So acknowledging that it's okay to have developed those when you're a kid, because you don't know. You don't know how the world works when you're a kid. You just see a very small bubble of the world, and your parents and most your priorities are different when you're a kid. So translating that into your adult priorities and context is part of the program.
So that's one of the things that I was curious about then, is like, these are lifelong patterns for most people. They're things that have been going on for years and years and years. And yet within a matter of weeks, you can actually see a very positive turnaround in those feelings and in those behaviors that may actually become more limiting than they are now helpful. Can you talk a little bit about some of the things that you've seen in people who have gone through the program? What are some of the things that they have been able then to do after they've gone through the positive intelligence program?
Well, that's a good question. I've had people coming to me with the happy tears in their eyes, saying that it's changed their lives. and people who have been dealing with some very difficult situations, even at home, with tragic things going on at home, and realizing that they now have the power to get through it, right? Because they were
Yeah.
letting it eat them up the whole time and feeling like they weren't good enough to react to the situation. That is like major life changing to people at work, feeling suddenly empowered where they can actually manage their teams better and be more in touch with who they are, and not let the people get under their skin, and then have better results at work. Now, I'm trying to think of a specific example of that. Recently, I had somebody who was letting the criticism get to them. All right. So
Yeah.
they were in a technical position, and typically people in technical positions have some kind of design review or some kind of review of the product or the technology that they're developing. And if they're involved in it, there's going to be clearly in the room, people are going to look at it and say, oh, well, what about this problem or that problem? And there are positive ways to react to that, and thank you, and let's look at that. And there are negative ones that probably are the saboteurs speaking, right?
Yeah.
And giving a person the opportunity to slow down, acknowledge that, you know, uh, uh, see what the triggers were that got them in that way, and take the moment just to have a control, and react to it in a positive way, allow them to suddenly be allowed to be in meetings and have everyone appreciate them. I mean, so I guess you would say the result was that their boss had been concerned that they weren't a good leader, and it turned it around to their boss was now very pleased with their leadership capabilities and being able to lead the meeting positively.
Yeah.
And they actually got promoted
Oh,
as a
wow.
result. Yeah. So,
Very
yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
So this really can change lives, and it's interesting to me that on the surface it looks very simple, it looks very straightforward, and yet the way that it's put together, it just works. The things that I've noticed in my own self since I went through the program is that my impulse to overreact to things is not as strong as it used to be.
Hmm.
And so it's like I have a tendency to go a little bit slower. I have a tendency to not jump to conclusions as quickly as I used to. And that has just given me a lot more room to be able to respond to people rather than to be in that reactionary mode. It's helped a lot around the house.
Yeah, I know. Well, see, that is the thing about this. It can help you at work, but it usually helps you in your life all around.
Yeah.
Yeah. At home is a big one. People don't always bring that to work and talk about it, but certainly we all have those reactions at home that we want to try to slow down, I guess you would say.
Yeah. Well, the thing that's also interesting is that the saboteur kind of feelings are still there sometimes.
Hmm.
But my reaction to them is different than it has ever been. And that's where the freedom is. That's where the freedom lies within this program, I think.
Hmm. And sometimes you get a little out of shape because you're not doing the PQ reps anymore,
Yeah.
the saboteur takes hold, and it might take a little longer to say, "Oh, wait a minute, I remember what this feeling is now,"
Yeah.
and pull yourself out of it. If you're doing the reps, and staying sort of in the mental fitness, that would happen more quickly, and you could pull yourself out. So
Yeah.
that's just like with exercise, right? Like it might take you a little longer, like in physical exercise, a little longer to do something, but realizing it and just letting you, I mean, you've learned it. It's
Yeah.
there. The muscles, the brain muscles have been trained. So it does definitely can stick with you.
Yeah, it's very good. I have benefited greatly from it. Can you talk to a little bit about you offer an individual program with this where people can work through this individually with you? Tell us a little bit about how long that is, where people would find out more information, things like
Mhm.
that.
Sure. Yeah, I work with people on positive intelligence, I often incorporate it into a coaching engagement that I have, and often work with people either in career coaching or leadership development.
Yeah.
And the specific program for positive intelligence is a 6-week program, and includes the app and the exercises and all the book and the knowledge that has been developed around it, but also coaching sessions with me to help a person sort of get engaged, figure out what their goals are, especially at work, right? Because the positive intelligence is mostly around learning the techniques, but if you're bringing it into the workplace, what does that look like? Are you meeting those goals? And having some accountability, because one of the things that is important, Franklin, is keeping it up, right? I mean, 6 weeks, it's a little bit intense and you have to keep doing it. And sometimes you just get a little tired of it, but having somebody in there to help you, cheer you on and keep you accountable can help you finish the program and actually get the results that you want. So, so it's usually a 6-week program, and it can be incorporated into a longer coaching engagement if people have other things that they want to work on. And all of my information is on the website on flexibleworksolutions.com. And you can look up coaching there, and there's positive intelligence. I also do workshops if you want to bring it into a team or
I was going to ask that this is also available for teams. And
yes,
so it's not just for individuals. If someone were listening to what we're saying now and they were saying, I think that this would be helpful for me, I mean, what are the kinds of things that you would help people? I mean, what would they need to know that they would decide to take this program?
Well, let's see. Anyone who has that they're feeling like they could be achieving more. Right. Or that they're feeling like they're having a barrier and they don't understand why. Or they're getting into a new position and they want to be really good at it. And they're like, I don't know, what's going to come up for me as I have this new situation. So people who are in that, those kinds of situations might be looking for something to help them calm their inner critics or help them achieve more. And, sometimes people at companies who have a budget for leadership development or personal development sign up for coaching. And we also have ones that are for individuals that are like, if you're personally just doing it on your own dime, that are less expensive. I mean, I guess readiness is something, right? I mean, usually people who are looking for something to get them to jump to the next level are the ones who reach out.
I think for me, the thing that was appealing about the program when you announced it and when you put out the invitation was that I was kind of in a place where I felt a little bit, I knew that there were things that I needed to do, but I wasn't doing them. And I felt like that was the thing that made this program appealing to me, was that this was a way for me to understand where's this resistance coming from, and what are some ways that I can actually, change that and reprogram it. And the program was really helpful for me at that time in doing those things. So that's my
adding structure too. I think the structure is really good, because sometimes you can read a book and try to get better at something, but having a program where it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and some accountability and things to do each day can really help you feel like you're making progress and in the right direction.
All right. Well, everyone who's been hearing this, we've been talking about positive intelligence with Joanie Connell from Flexible Work Solutions. And if you ever have any questions about any of these things that Joanie talks about, flexibleworksolutions.com is the place to find her. And if you're interested in taking that assessment to find out what your saboteurs are, positiveintelligence.com, is that right?
Yep.
All right, Joanie. Well, this has been fun. I've enjoyed revisiting the program with you, and always appreciate the time that we get to spend together.
Yeah, same. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, before I forget, Joanie also hosts a podcast. It's called Reinventing Nerds, and I think you should listen to it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's a good one too. Yeah.
Awesome. We'll have Joanie come back again sometime soon and dig into another topic. Thanks for listening to Your Own Best Company. If you enjoyed the show, would you do me a favor and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast host? If you really love it, leave me a review or share it with your circles. If you feel like your career is reaching a dead end, or you're feeling a deep sense of dissatisfaction in your work right now, I help people discover their gifts and then find or create new opportunities that are the best fit for their talent, experience, and lifestyle. Email me at coaching@franklintaggart.com for more information. I also help people start, finish, and launch creative projects, and I offer an ongoing marketing mastermind for solopreneurs and freelancers. More information on these programs and services can be found at franklintaggart.com. Thanks again for spending this time with me.